Hi everyone, this is Elizabeth at craftsbyhappystamper.com. Thanks for joining me today. This is the part of the One Stamp at a Time Father's Day themed blog hop. You can follow on the blog hop if you click on the link in the description. Plus, there is a detailed list of all the supplies I used and links to where you can get them all if you click on the blog post that's in the description. And this is one of two videos that I've put up today, which include a wall-mounted bottle opener that I used as a manly sort of project to give my brother. So don't forget to check out that video also. So let's get started. So first I took a piece of 5.5 by 11-inch cardstock and I scored it at 4.25 inch, and then I flipped it and scored it in 2.5 inches and folded it in a Z. So that was chocolate chip cardstock, and what I'm looking at right now is crumb cake cardstock, which I cut at 5.25 by 2.25 and 5.25 by 3 inches. And all the dimensions are on my blog, so you can just click on the description to get all the dimensions easily. So now I'm using a large oval punch to punch out a handle at the top where it folds so that I can see where I want that. Now I'm using a wood grain embossing folder on the crumb cake cardstock. These are the two smaller pieces that I was telling you about. And now you can see that I have the wood grain already there. And I'm just gluing the bigger piece to the top. And I'm trying to not get glue in the center where that hole's punched out. But if it happens, it doesn't really matter because I'm going to punch it out again. The only reason why I punched it first was because the punch won't go easily through 4 sheets of cardstock. So I did 2, and then I'll do 2 again. Now I'm just using the tear strip tape, and I'm creating a pocket. This is double-sided tape, and it's score tape. You can take off the edges and then push it down. Now there's a pocket there, and now I am gluing the smaller piece, which is 5.25 by 2.25, to the front flap. And now it looks more like a tool case. Well, not really, because it doesn't have the holes in it, but I just use liquid glue to glue it down. But before I re-punch out the hole, I want to put in the center white piece of cardstock. So I'm going to use a sentiment from the Guide Greeting stamp set, and but I'm just putting it in the center and punching out where that hole is right now. So I had to really kind of press hard to get it to punch all the way through, but it does punch through. And now I can take that piece out. It will be lined up perfectly later, and stamp my sentiment. And I try to use basic gray stamp. I say try to use because I did use it, but it needs to be re-inked. My ink pad needs to be re-inked. So it came out very light and you could barely see it. So I actually make a second version of this card later that I'll show you how to make it, but I used Memento black ink instead of the basic gray. So this inside sentiment says, "Thanks for this and all the other life lessons you taught me." I really love that sentiment. I think it's so appropriate for a dad or a father. I call my dad father, so I really appreciate that this stamp set has the word father in it in addition to dad. So now that I have my inside sentiment stamped, I can use my liquid glue to glue down the inside, and we will be finished with the inside of the card. Isn't that awesome? So it was at this point that I realized, oh no, I wanted to make this more of like a curved tote. So instead of trying to fix it, I decided to just make 2 versions of the card. And I'll show you the second version later. So the front of the card is going to say Happy Father's Day. Now I'm just lining up my sentiment. I'm using the grid on my block to help line it up straight. And then I decided that that wasn't working well. I was going to use the grid on my mat to line it up straight. You can see the top of my head there. So I lined it up straight, and I got a piece of just scrap Whisper White cardstock, and I got my Memento black ink pad because I wanted it to really stand out. I'm making sure I inked it well because this is my first time using this stamp. And, you know, sometimes it doesn't ink completely across it the first time. So now I'm just stamping, trying to get it as straight as possible, but I can fix it later if I didn't. But I think I did a pretty good job. And then I'm cutting it out, and it turns out that the perfect width for this sentiment is 3/4 of an inch. So I got my Stampin' Trimmer and I cut out a 3/4 inch. I didn't know at the time, but just now lining it up, I can tell that it was 3/4 of an inch. So that's what I cut at. And then I got my paper snips and I decided to cut flags, and both ends. So I cut straight down the center all the way to where I wanted it, and then I cut the flag ends. Now, you should all be aware that there is an awesome new punch that will do these flags for you, and then you don't have to worry about making uneven punches. But I do not have that punch yet. Can you believe it? It will be on my to get list later, I'm sure. So I did a double end, and then I decided to mat it with more chocolate chip cardstock. And right now I'm just cutting out a piece that's too long. I know it's going to be too long, but I didn't want it ridiculously long. But the width is going to be 1 inch so that I have a nice even border, the same type of border I would have on the rest of the card. So you could see me gluing it down now, and obviously it's too big, too long. But this gives me wiggle room to make my flag. So I'm going to cut down the center again and then cut the 2 points on each side. And that way I have a relatively close to perfect border all surrounding the entire sentiment, which I like it like that. But, some people don't appreciate it as much as I do, so they could do it differently, or you could do it differently. But that's the way I did it. I think it looks nice. I'm happy with it. And it's going to look really great popped up there. But as I was thinking about it, I was like, this needs something else. This toolkit needs a wrench. So I used my 1 3/4 inch uh, hole punch and my 1 1/4 inch hole punch. And at first I was like, now I'm going to cut a centerpiece. And then I realized the easier way to do this would be to cut the small piece first. And then there you go, a piece like that, the 1 1/4 inch around it. And of course I did it wrong. So I guess I should have saved that for the blooper. I had to get another piece of spare basic gray cardstock. I did the small hole punch, and now I'm lining up the 1 1/4 inch hole punch, and that was much better. So now that I have the, that's going to be one end, and I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch strip here. I'm gluing that to the base, or I will be gluing that to the base, but for some reason I decided to do that off camera, where I took my word window punch and punched a little hole in the side of my larger circle, and then I glued on the bottom of the wrench and the top of the wrench, which I'm doing now. And I always put the glue on the smaller piece because that way you know it won't overlap. Now that I have my wrench made, I wanted it to look more three-dimensional, so I decided to get my basic gray ink out, which still hasn't been re-inked, and a sponge, so you can see me. I really have to work at it to get ink on there. And then I'm sponging the edges of my wrench, which I'm doing now. I like sponging. I don't know about you. I find it relaxing, although I always get ink all over all of my hands. I feel like I'm constantly washing ink off. Oh, but I recently discovered that antibacterial uh, hand sanitizer is really good at getting ink off your hands. So there's not my little tip for the day. So I decided it needed something else besides the wrench, and I decided I'm going to use the burlap ribbon and make a little flag to go underneath the sentiment. And you could see I'm doing the same method that I used previously to make my banner end. I don't know if the new punch will punch through burlap or not, but it's worth a try, sure, certainly. So now that I have what I want, I decided that I like to use glue dots to adhere it, so I'm lining it up in the front and then just bending it over the flap. But of course, it's not going to stay down if I just leave it like that with just the ends, so I had to put another one in the front center to hold it down. And then I use Stampin' Dimensionals on each side of my sentiment to adhere it to the center. And ta-da! It's just about done. And this is a perfect holder for a gift card. Now, when I give this to my father, I plan on putting a Home Depot gift card, so it will have that nice little shiny gift card sticking, poking out the front. But you could actually not put anything on there if you didn't want to, or you could put any sort of gift certificate that you think your father would appreciate, or your brother, or whoever you're making this card for. So now I'm just showing you making the Z folds again, and I scored it the exact same places I did the first time, 4 1/4, and then flipped it and did 2 1/2, and then I'm folding it in a Z fold. So this is the second card where I'm going to angle the sides. So I'm using my bone folder to really make those creases crease well. And then needed to cut the diagonal so that this looks more like a tote. And I am just eyeballing it, but if I had this to do a third time, I would have used my ruler to measure, maybe a half inch down on the short side and 1 inch across on the top on each so that each diagonal was exactly the same. But I didn't do that, so mine isn't completely even, but I still think it looks nice, and I'm sure that if you gave this to your father, he would still appreciate it. So you could see me using my trimmer, and my trimmer does not cut through 2 layers of cardstock well. So, but it does give you a good outline. So I used my paper snips to finish cutting all the way through the cardstock. It does almost 2 layers, but not quite 2 layers. And then I punched in my hole for the handle like I showed you for the first time. So now I need to take my crumb cake cardstock and get the perfect angle on it. And at first I was going to mistakenly eyeball it, and I was like, wait a minute, this isn't going to work right because I didn't really measure the first time. So it took me a little bit of while to realize that. But then I realized I could just line up where I want it to be on the card, the final card, and then flip it upside down and make marks with a pencil or a pen. It doesn't really matter because you won't be able to see it afterwards. So if you just draw lines where the diagonal is, and then you can line up that line with the very left part of the trimmer, and it will leave you just a little bit of a border when you put it back into the card, which is perfect, which is exactly what I wanted because I wanted a little bit of a border. So I don't know how I didn't actually write on the card the first time, but see, I'm pointing out how you cut off just a little bit more than what's there, but it still gives you a perfect diagonal. And if there's any ink left, don't worry about it because it will, be on the underside when you cut it. So now I'm cutting my inside part. I just need a piece of cardstock that is 5 1/4 by 4 inches for the inside sentiment. And I did the same thing to make the centers for the inside sentiment, drawing a line. This time, instead of doing the basic gray, I just went ahead and used the Memento basic black ink. And you can tell already that it shows up so much better with the black ink than it did with my basic gray. But that's not a Stampin' Up! Issue. That is a me issue that my basic gray is dry. So don't hold that against Stampin' Up! But that's definitely my fault that it's dry. So here I'm putting glue and gluing down the inside sentiment. And you could see I had a mess up the first time I glued it down, which is why you could see that. And then I'm going to make sure I have it on the lined up the right way. Because mine aren't exactly symmetrical, there is a correct direction and an incorrect direction. But if you make them symmetrical, then there wouldn't be any issue with that. So now I'm gluing down the wood grained crumb cake piece in the front. And then once that's adhered, I can close it, and it doesn't matter if you have glue on the inside or not because the pieces that are sticking together you are about to punch out. So you can see I'm using my large oval punch to line up the punch correctly and punch out the handle. And ta-da! That basic part is done, and the rest is exactly the same as the last video. So I don't, as the beginning part of the video. So I probably don't need to show you everything else that I did. And ta-da, here's the 2 finished cards that I made. I used just random gift certificates to show what it could look like, but you don't have to use gift certificates at all. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, then please do so. Thank you for joining me on the One Stamp at a Time blog hop. I have a second video that I put up today, which is a wall-mounted bottle opener, a nice DIY project you could do with anybody. Also, if you click on the link in the description, it will give you all of the details for both of my projects, including links to how you can get your own products, and you can follow along on the rest of the awesome projects on the One Stamp at a Time blog hop. Thanks.